On the set of Disney's 1961 classic, The Parent Trap, 14-year-old Hayley Mills was the crown jewel of Hollywood, the most beloved child star in the world. But to her on-screen father, Brian Keith, she was little more than a nuisance he could barely tolerate. Audiences saw a heartwarming family comedy, but behind the cameras, a bitter, unspoken conflict was simmering. Mills would later admit that she utterly hated Keith, and the reason why created a toxic atmosphere that haunted her for decades. To understand the clash that unfolded during the making of The Parent Trap, you first need to understand the two very different worlds colliding on that set. One was a world of English country gardens, famous parents, and the gentle mentorship of Walt Disney himself. The other was a world of broken homes, military discipline, and the brutal lessons of war. These two worlds took shape in a young girl named Hayley Mills and a battle-hardened man named Brian Keith. Hayley Catherine Rose Vivian Mills was born into the very heart of Britain's acting elite on April 18, 1946. Her father was the legendary Sir John Mills, her mother a successful writer and playwright, and her sister Juliet, an actress in her own right. But Hayley's childhood wasn't the bustle of London or Hollywood. It was a quiet, idyllic upbringing on a 400-acre dairy farm in Sussex, sheltered, peaceful, and full of love. Her entry into acting came almost by chance. At 12, she was discovered by director J. Lee Thompson while he was visiting her father about a new film, Tiger Bay. The lead role had been written for a boy, but Thompson was struck by the spark he saw in Hayley playing in the garden. He changed the role for her on the spot, no screen test, no hesitation. Her performance was electrifying. She won a BAFTA for Most Promising Newcomer, and her natural talent caught fire across the Atlantic. According to Hollywood lore, it was Walt Disney's wife, Lillian, who first saw Tiger Bay by chance while ducking into a London theater to avoid the rain. She was so impressed that she urged Walt himself to see it. Disney flew to London, met Hayley at the Dorchester Hotel, and within days signed her to a 6-picture deal again, without a single audition. Almost overnight, Hayley Mills became a global sensation. Her role in 1960's Pollyanna earned her a special Juvenile Academy Award, the last ever given. She was now Disney's golden girl. For Hayley, working at the Disney studio was like living inside a dream. She described it as warm, protective, almost like family. Walt himself became a mentor and even a surrogate father figure. But this sheltered, carefully curated world was about to collide with Brian Keith, a man whose life had been shaped not by privilege, but by war. Born November 14, 1921, in Bayonne, New Jersey, Keith grew up in a fractured home. His parents, both actors, divorced when he was young. His stepmother for a time was Peg Entwistle, the actress who would later become infamous for leaping to her death from the H of the Hollywood sign. By 19, Keith had left the instability of his childhood behind to enlist in the U.S. Marine Corps. After Pearl Harbor, he trained as a radio operator and tail gunner on SBD Dauntless dive bombers. He flew dangerous missions in the South Pacific through stretches of sky so deadly, Marines grimly called it the Valley of Death. For his heroism, he was awarded the Air Medal. When the war ended, Keith returned not as a boy, but as a man forged by combat. He carved out a career in Hollywood, but not in light-hearted family films. He was known for gruff cowboys, hardened criminals, and tough men who carried a quiet authority. Direct, unsentimental, blunt to the point of discomfort, he wasn't shaped by sound stages, but by survival. And in 1961, this no-nonsense war veteran found himself cast as the father opposite Disney's sheltered child star. The collision of those worlds would prove unforgettable. He was a Marine through and through, blunt, efficient, and unbending. And now he was about to walk onto the perfectly polished set of a Walt Disney production, straight into the path of its most precious star. The set of The Parent Trap in 1961 was supposed to radiate Disney magic, but behind the cheerful illusions, it was a technical minefield. The film was a huge production, and its success rested entirely on the performance of 14-year-old Hayley Mills. She wasn't just another cast member, she was the movie. For audiences to believe in twin sisters Susan and Sharon, Hayley had to carry the story twice over. That meant flawless acting, perfect timing, and the stamina to repeat scenes again and again under enormous pressure. The film's groundbreaking effects only added to the strain. Using the sodium vapor process, an early version of green screen, the crew filmed each scene multiple times. Hayley would play one twin opposite a body double, then switch costumes, hair, and personality to play the other. The crew marked footprints on the floor, ensuring everyone hit the exact same position. Even the slightest mistake an inch off mark would ruin the illusion. On top of this, Hayley had to master two distinct American accents, one Californian, one Bostonian. Sometimes, when one twin was pretending to be the other, she admitted she didn't even know which voice she was supposed to use. It was the kind of role that would challenge a seasoned adult actor. For a 14-year-old girl, it was overwhelming. What she needed was patience, guidance, and reassurance. What she got from Brian Keith was the opposite. Keith worked on set like a Marine, fast, blunt, and uninterested in the delicate mechanics of filmmaking. He hated endless rehearsals, preferring to skim his lines and dive straight into a scene. "Let's go," he'd say, while others were still warming up. Improvisation was his style, but improvisation was exactly what The Parent Trap could not allow. Every movement, every glance, every word had to be precise. For Keith, this was maddening. For Hayley, it was devastating. Every time she needed another take, every time the crew reset a scene, she could feel his impatience burning beside her. And Keith wasn't the kind of man to hide his feelings. Years later, whispers from the set told of a quiet war between the two stars. Keith, they said, had a cruel nickname for her, the Golden Goose, a jab at her status as Disney's prized child star. Crew members claimed he rolled his eye when she asked questions, cut her off during table reads, and even mocked her British accent in front of others, dismissing it as highfalutin nonsense. The most infamous story never confirmed, but repeated for years, told of a moment when Hayley flubbed a line during a tense scene. Keith allegedly slammed a chair to the floor, stormed off set, and later blamed her for ruining the rhythm of the shoot. But in truth, the most painful wounds weren't the outbursts. They were the small daily cuts, the sighs, the sarcasm, the dismissive looks. For Hayley Mills, the legendary family film that made her a star also left her with memories of being made to feel small, unwanted, and worthless by the man playing her father. Hayley Mills was shy by nature, already weighed down by the immense pressure of fame and the flawless image Disney had built around her. Beneath the smiles, she was full of self-doubt, a young girl navigating an adult world she wasn't ready for. Brian Keith's gruffness and impatience cut deeply, like salt on an open wound. The small insults, the dismissive gestures, the constant sense of being a nuisance, they left scars. Years later, Hayley summed it up in just a few words. He was difficult. She explained that he made it painfully clear she wasn't welcome in his space. In a private letter, discovered long after her autobiography was published, she confessed that Keith was the one person she could never forgive, not for what he did, but for how small he made her feel. At the very height of her stardom, when she was the most famous child actor in the world, Brian Keith made her question her worth. It's a familiar pain many young people feel when confronted by an intimidating adult. But for Hayley, it all happened under the harsh glare of Hollywood lights. The truth is more complicated than a simple story of cruelty. Keith wasn't a monster to everyone. Maureen O'Hara, who played Hayley's mother in The Parent Trap, admired his rugged strength. She worked with him 3 times, and even handpicked him for her western The Deadly Companions. Kathy Garver, his niece on Family Affair, remembered him as warm, sensitive, and almost fatherly. So why was Hayley's experience so different? It came down to power and perspective. Keith, a 39-year-old Marine combat veteran, was accustomed to working with hardened adults. Hayley was only 14, still sheltered by Disney's protective studio environment. Keith never softened his behavior for his young co-star. What he considered blunt professionalism felt like rejection and cruelty to a vulnerable teenager. What O'Hara saw as rugged honesty, Hayley experienced as a personal attack. Keith offered no mentorship, no encouragement. To her, he embodied everything frightening about Hollywood: the arrogance, the impatience, the cold dismissal of youthful feelings. He became the man who made her feel like she didn't belong. The pain of the Parent Trap didn't fade. When the cameras stopped, it marked both Hayley Mills and Brian Keith, setting them on opposite paths. For Hayley, the experience fueled a hunger to break free from the very image Disney had built. For Keith, it preceded the role that would forever redefine him in the public eye. The pressure to remain forever young, something Hayley felt so keenly while working with Keith, pushed her to break away from Disney's carefully guarded image. Even during her years as the studio's brightest star, she had grown frustrated with its tight control. Disney blocked her from more serious projects like Lolita and Exodus, insisting those roles were too adult for her wholesome reputation. In 1966, she took a bold step that shocked audiences, starring in the British drama The Family Way. The film included a nude scene, a dramatic departure from her Disney persona. For many, it was jarring. Pollyanna was gone. But for Hayley, it was liberation. It was her way of stepping directly into the intimidating world of grown-up filmmaking that Brian Keith had once embodied, no longer running from it, but proving she belonged in it. The painful lessons of The Parent Trap gave her the resolve to reclaim her career and shed the Disney princess image for good. Meanwhile, Brian Keith's career took a very different turn. Just a few years after The Parent Trap, he landed the role that would define him, Uncle Bill Davis, on the hit sitcom Family Affair. Premiering in 1966, the show featured Keith as a bachelor, suddenly thrust into fatherhood, raising 3 orphaned children. The character blended his trademark gruffness with unexpected tenderness, and audiences adored it. The role earned him 3 Emmy nominations and made him one of America's favorite TV dads. His young co-stars remembered him as a kind, supportive presence, a far cry from the coldness Hayley had once felt. He had learned to channel his tough exterior into warmth, creating the image of a protective, caring guardian. The irony was striking. The same man who once made a child star feel small and unwanted became beloved for playing the ultimate father figure. It revealed the complexity of Brian Keith, a man capable of both blunt intimidation and deep compassion. His life reflected these contrasts. Professionally, he found success and acclaim. Privately, he faced enormous pain. Later in life, he battled emphysema and lung cancer. In 1997, just weeks after his daughter's tragic suicide, Brian Keith, heartbroken and ill, took his own life at 75. He was a decorated Marine, a rugged cowboy, and a cherished television uncle. But beneath the roles, he remained an enigma to most. On screen, The Parent Trap created the illusion of a perfect family loved by millions. Off-screen, the reality was far more complicated. A collision between a battle-hardened veteran from a world of harsh realities and a sheltered English rose from the protective kingdom of Disney. The resentment between them wasn't born of one dramatic fight, but of a quiet, constant unease, a clash of personalities that left a lasting mark. It's a reminder that in Hollywood, the happiest stories often conceal the most human, complicated truths.